Final Fantasy XIII is an absolutely dreadful game. This game is so bad that I'm pretty sure anyone's parents who got it for them in Christmas back in 2009, it was their way of telling you that you were adopted and they never loved you. If you want to skip this entire video and just have everything summed up here in a few minutes, here it is. Playing this game is more or less the equivalent of the first few minutes of Duke Nukem Forever, where you hold a literal turd that you find in a toilet. That's what this game feels like, holding a turd.
What kind of sick mother picks up wet feces?
With that being said, this game has been divisive for years and torn apart by other various YouTubers, including Spoony, before he completely lost any and all semblance of sanity. Low blows aside, it's worth noting that Japan, this game is apparently far better received. That just goes to show you that even in the shores of Nippon, they can be dead wrong. Not just about this, but also for giving us Icon, which is something I still have yet to recover from. Against my better judgment, I actually bought a copy of this game to try and see if it's truly as bad as people say it is, and to absolutely no surprise, this thing was still sealed in its original cling wrap, implying that absolutely nobody wanted to play this reminder that the human race is far beyond saving, as there are still several sealed copies unsold over a decade later. They weren't even going for collector's prices either. I got mine for $8, which I'm pretty sure a copy of Bad Dudes goes for more than this piece of shit. But because I can't make a video any longer by just on a game that I haven't even shown myself playing yet, I'm forced to get on with it, and thus proceeds as me attempting to play this absolute god-awful time leech. I say attempt because apparently this game was all over and given several fat shots for its auto battle feature, which is more or less the game playing for you. And to my understanding, this is the first time that Square Enix introduced this feature. At least they had the decency to not make you actually endure this game by actually playing it. But it still exists, and it's good enough reason for you to drop trow and let a big steamy chocolate and mud monkey on it.
I don't know if you really want to get into what you find in the trash.
We'll get more into the battle system later, though. For this video, I'll be using the PS3 version of the game, but I'm told the Xbox 360 version back in the day was worse in terms of performance, but it's also worth noting that due to the absolutely horrible idea to implement HDCP into the PS3 with no way of disabling it, I'm required to use a convoluted setup just to record this damn thing. Let it be known that I suffered for you, so please subscribe. Before we go any further though, a little backstory. I actually bought this file and release back in 2009 for my girlfriend at the time. She played it twice and then forgot about it, and my precious $60. Keep in mind, I was a broke college student, so that's $60 in ramen noodle money, which needless to say is a lot. I'll never get it back, and I'm still fucking mad about it. I could probably make at least a million different overused jokes about this game's level design being a long, narrow hallway with only a few stray paths, but that wouldn't be treading any new grounds. Except the best stories are worth retelling, because this game is just a long, narrow hallway with only a few stray paths. I wish I was exaggerating here. Hell, I wish I had the sense of humor to make a joke as good as the visual you're seeing on screen right now. But literally, so many of the game's maps are just long, narrow pathways where you just walk from one cutscene to the next. It's not until far later when the game actually opens up a little bit. And by far later, I mean close to where the game is over. So many of the maps look like... In actuality though, some of the places in the game look very detailed and quite stunning. In fact, one of the nice things I can say about this game is the visuals overall are quite impressive for a game released in 2009. Some minor touch-ups and you could believe this came out in like 2017 or something. It's actually quite astounding. Unfortunately, you won't get to see much of this because, as I mentioned before, the game is a long series of always. I know I've said that I'd avoid this tired joke, but it's impossible when so many of the maps literally are just long hallways with maybe a tiny pocket to explore before going down the same long, boring road leading to nothing of interest. I actually got to a point where I saw 2 paths on the map, thinking the game was about to actually change it up and let me have 2 hallways to choose from, only for one to comically get blocked before I was even able to set foot on it.
End of the road.
I really wish I wasn't making a joke when I said the game doesn't allow you to actually explore until Chapter 11, but then you likely won't care anymore by that point. The first time I played this was back in 2009. I made it to Chapter 2 before I quit playing. However, in the spirit of being fair, I am going to include a few snippets from the longtime series fan, Larissa, from her website, Defiers of Fate. I actually reached out to her hoping to get a response for her to state in this video directly, but I'm not sure if the email on her website is inactive or she just wasn't interested in my inquiries. Either way, if she's watching this video and wants anything, I would gladly do a follow-up or something. Here's what she states on her website regarding Final Fantasy XIII in an essay called In Defense of Final Fantasy XIII, Linearity and Final Fantasy. Anytime Final Fantasy XIII comes up in conversation on the internet, and sometimes even in real life, the discussion tends to skew, well, pretty nasty. Let's not mince words here. There are people who hate this game series, whether it's the first game or the whole sub-series. They tend to consider it the worst thing that Square has ever put out. I think they're forgetting Dirge of Cerberus personally, but the point stands. Look at literally any article on Final Fantasy XIII and its sequels and load up any YouTube video, and the comments will be filled with people saying what a piece of crap Final Fantasy XIII is. And yes, the games have their flaws, but do they deserve this level of vitriol? No. So let's examine just why people dislike Final Fantasy XIII so much, and why ultimately this dislike doesn't make sense. 1. Final Fantasy games aren't linear. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but they are. And yet, this was a criticism Final Fantasy XIII received from everyone. The game led you from one point to the next, breaking gameplay for cutscenes and character development, particularly in the first part of the game, except that's what every Final Fantasy game does. Let's take fan favorite Final Fantasy VII example. Yes, there are side quests, the most notable one is the Wutai side quest, but you can also decide to ignore that thing in the sky and breed the perfect chocobo. You can check out of Gelnica and even go fight at Fort Condor if you actually like that minigame. You don't, no one does. But none of these side quests open up until well into the game. The Wutai side quest doesn't open up till late into Disc 1. That's the first significant side quest in the game. Up until that point, Final Fantasy VII is entirely linear. Furthermore, aside from chocobo breeding and general screwing around with the golden saucer, Final Fantasy VII is pretty light on side quests. I mean, you can actually level up all your materia and fight the weapons, but there simply aren't many objectives in the game to accomplish. It's a very linear game. And like Final Fantasy XIII, the entire beginning of the game, the Midgar portion, is largely spent by cutscenes interrupted by brief breaks of gameplay. Now, these are her thoughts, and while I can see she makes some points, I have to respectfully disagree. No diss towards Larissa, as without some of her info on her website, it might not even be able to figure this game out. She actually does a really great job explaining this game. However, I can't agree that this is a sound argument. While yes, Final Fantasy games have been linear in the past, 13 takes the idea and goes absolutely bonkers with it. It's a level of linearity that is unrivaled and is taken to levels of absurdity. While Final Fantasy VII doesn't start opening up until the end of the first disc, Final Fantasy XIII doesn't start opening up until the game is nearly over. Also, other games doing something doesn't make doing it in this game a good thing either. Many people were critical about the elements within 13 that were also critical about the elements in the other entries in the series too. I'm not going to say she was wrong, I just disagree. And again, I'd love to have her in a video where we can discuss this at length. In terms of design though, this game just isn't it. Not only is its level design obviously done by someone with only a minor understanding of how video game level design should work, but some of its sound direction is a bit odd too. While it has an excellent orchestrated soundtrack, I couldn't help but die laughing at how some of the sounds work. The sounds of enemies when they take a massive hit making grunting noises, or the fact that Fang's weapon makes an audible slap sound like you'd hear in a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I doubt I'll ever be able to hear them and not laugh at how absolutely cartoonish they sound. Like, you can't make this up. Again, I wish this was just me making some kind of editing joke. Now we get on to the actual meat of this review. I know many of you probably thought just sitting here on the hallway thing would be the high point of the video, but you'd be mistaken. For the uninitiated, I envy you for not having played over 60 hours of this awful fest. But now I have to actually explain how this game works, don't I? Okay, so if Final Fantasy XIII was a Monopoly board, every single square in the board would just be railroads, because that's this game's absolute profession. Constantly railroading the player in an ongoing effort to stop any progression or fun. Not only are you forbidden from ever exploring for the majority of the game until it opens up way later, and by which time you will have decided to shelve this game and go crank one out instead, but you are even forbidden from increasing your character's power abilities for long periods of time. The game ties growth to story progression, meaning you can't just grind past a certain point to get stronger to overcome your challenges. You're forced to figure out how the developers wanted you to do it with no freedom to go about the way you want in the vast majority of the game. Hell, the game takes 20 hours before you even have all your party members assembled. Up to that point, you're just moving from point A to point B to listen to boring cutscenes about no one cares about, when all you really want to do is level up. Speaking of leveling up, Final Fantasy XIII doesn't have traditional levels, so when I say that, I mean it doesn't really have them at all. Or at least not for you. Enemies have levels, and they mean absolutely all nothing. An enemy that is an endgame could be something like level 9, for example, but something that is far weaker could be like level 50. Enemy levels have no meaning, so you may as well just ignore them. I don't think I've seen a game where enemy levels have so little meaning since I played RuneScape. As far as your own leveling goes, well, you actually have this weird job system called the Crystarium. How does it work? Well, it doesn't work. That is to say, it tries to be similar to Final Fantasy X, and it's just a blatant insult to 10. So how this works is that instead of earning experience, you earn CP, not that CP, to unlock nodes on the Crystarium system, which in theory sounds alright, except you can't just grind up points to get stronger to take on tougher enemies until the game allows you to by progressing through the story enough. How you are expected to get stronger outside of this is using the weapon leveling system, which is only vaguely explained, and you'll definitely need a guide to understand it in full and how it works. Essentially, you put components onto weapons to level them up. Natural components give tiny amounts of experience but increase the experience multiplier. Synthetic components give large amounts of experience but reduce the experience multiplier. In practice, this means increasing the multiplier as high as possible, then dumping components onto the level to level it faster. When the weapon reaches max level, you use a catalyst material to turn it into a next tier weapon and then rinse and repeat. The problem is that this costs more money than even Elon Musk has, and of all Final Fantasy games, this one is the absolute stingiest when it comes to money. Getting things to sell to get cash is so incredibly rare, you'll be broker than your mama for the rest of the game. Honestly, I always hated systems where instead of dropping money, the game drops treasures, forcing you to sell them, because all it really does is add another step to the process. And I get that it's more realistic, but it's a game and I just took down giant turtle monsters with a set of handguns. What's more shitty is that the weapon upgrade system isn't even introduced until a good 6 hours into playing the game, but again, by this point, you're probably rubbing one out instead of playing this game anyway. Did I mention this is an RPG? An RPG where you don't have levels and where enemy levels mean nothing. The progression system is directly locked to story progression. The mechanics in this game just suck. We haven't even gotten to the battle system yet. The battle system of Final Fantasy XIII is called the Paradigm System, and it sounds all fancy and cool, but in practice, it more or less does end up being really as cool as you think it would be. Essentially, every character has roles that they play. Medics heal, Ravagers do magic damage, increase the stagger of enemies, and Commandos who do physical damage and stabilize staggered gauge and whatnot. See, the idea of the battle is to try and increase enemy stagger gauge until it's staggered. If you've played Final Fantasy VII Remake, you're somewhat familiar with this system, except here is how it works a lot worse. The general idea is to switch roles using what are called paradigm shifts when the battle calls for it. And while this sounds really awesome, being able to turn the tides of battle at a critical moment, it just mostly amounts to switching paradigms and hitting auto battle over and over and over and over again. See, the game is more reliant on all battle than Capcom is at teasing their fans with games they'll never make. Almost every fight more or less relies on it, and with the exception of a handful of fights later in the game. You can slow the flow of battle down to do these things manually, but you'll find that just makes fights more tedious and less fun. Essentially, most fights will go like this: quickly cast Libra to learn enemies' new weaknesses so the auto battle system will automatically exploit them, then switch paradigms when necessary and hit auto battle until the enemies are staggered. Just make sure to be careful because there are a few instances where enemies can't be staggered or staggering them somehow makes them stronger. Ultimately, this system could have actually been fun, and I will admit closer to the end of the game it really does start to come to life, becoming semi-entertaining to use, especially when enemies become far more complex. But it's a damn shame that it doesn't happen until close to the end of the game. Apparently they even realized they screwed up because from my understanding the sequels are more conventional turn-based RPGs. To make matters worse, as I mentioned before, the true way to get stronger in the game is leveling up your equipment. Because money is so hard to gather in this game, you'll find yourself being forced to use cheap tactics like Sazh's moveset to drop giant turtle monsters constantly in hopes they'll drop platinum ingots so you can progress.
Switch on these fireworks.
That's more or less the entire endgame too. You become Mario and go stomp several turtles. It makes some of the endgame achievements and cleanup absolute nightmare. If I actually have the platinum trophy in this game by the time this video comes out, and I display it on the screen, you have complete permission to call me whatever names you like in the comment section because I clearly deserve them for having such little self-respect. The battle system in this game is poop. Plain and simple, it's poop. Can we please splice in the scene from Duke Nukem Forever again from the start of the video?
Why am I doing this?
Hey, you've made it this far. You either hate yourself or you obviously have nothing of value that you could be doing right now. Either way, this is perhaps the most disappointing part of this game, the characters and story. Final Fantasy games are often praised for their story, even if they are a bit cheesy at times.
Real heroes don't need plans.
Well, this one would be the exception to the rule. 13 story and characters are so bland and desperately trying hard to be complex and interesting that this was kind of a game that began the days of Final Fantasy stories being somewhat bland. Many people feel the same way about 15 as well. Let's see our character roll call. We have Bland Cloud Wannabe, Guy Who Punches Things, Racist Stereotype, Annoying Australian, Another Annoying Australian, and Whiny Kid. As far as the story goes, the world of Final Fantasy XIII takes place between two worlds, one named Cocoon and the other one named Pulse. They've been sworn enemies since forever, and it's because this thing's called the fal'Cie. fal'Cie is sort of like gods or something. They're basically not really fully explained either. The fal'Cie have been warred each other for eons, and they use humans to do their bidding by branding them with marks that turns in what are called l'Cie. l'Cie are granted the ability to use magic and summons, but also seen as scary monsters, and thus enemies of the planet if they happen to be l'Cie of the opposing planet. The main cast become Pulse l'Cie, and are instantly branded as enemies of Cocoon. To save themselves from a horrible fate, they fulfill what's called a focus. All l'Cie are given a specific task they must complete or they'll turn into these wandering husks. If they succeed, they'll be turned into crystals. At the very start of the story, we find out that Lightning's sister, Sarah, who is also Snow's fiancé, is a l'Cie and turns into a crystal for completing her focus. And the general point of the game is to main cast to finish what their focus is to try and save Cocoon, though they spend a long time getting to the point.
Snap to it. We're rolling out.
Yeah. Hunting l'Cie, right?
The story is conveyed through several long and somewhat boring cutscenes, and I have to say that while the game attempts to add some twists and turns, it's at the level of M. Night Shyamalan where you kind of see it coming. It turns out that they're not exactly that interesting either. Again, I really have to point out the Duke Nukem turd thing again.
A turd in the hand is worth two in the bush.
Later, they do this whole thing where they try to get you more invested in Fang and Vanille by pointing out that they're actually like hundreds of years old or something and already completed their focus, but were rebranded as l'Cie again. It's not that really interesting if I'm honest, and there are many points of the story where they're just kind of up in the air. You can see a lot of effort went into the story, but it should have been examined by more proofreaders, unlike my scripts for these videos, which go through none. In the end, what you're left with is a story that's trying too hard to be deep and complex, but is actually shallow as a puddle of piss. Again, I have to state it, it's poop. Finally, we're at the part of the video where I can talk about something good regarding this game. The audio is actually pretty damn good, and its orchestrated soundtrack actually gets the job done, even if it is a bit too extra at times. The music in this game is composed by Masashi Hamauzu and was done with a complete orchestra. The game actually has quite a bit of music, as the soundtrack itself is over 4 hours long, so you never really feel like you're hearing the same music for too long. Honestly, he did a great job. Outside of the music though, I will admit the sound design is odd at times. You can definitely see where the budget went. I'd put more of the music in this video for you to listen to it, but copyrights and whatnot. A lot of the time, the thing I find myself doing most is exploring extra or endgame content. Most good games have things for you to unlock, so you can feel a sense of accomplishment for something and being rewarded for it. In a good game like Chrono Trigger, you get New Game Plus with additional endings you can unlock and such. However, here in Final Fantasy XIII, you don't get any of that. Instead, you unlock the ability to finally max out your characters. Yes, you heard that right. The ability to max out your levels, if you even want to call them that, is locked behind finishing the game. This also means grinding for the best equipment in the game is soft locked behind this, as well as many of the other things you need to unlock said weapons is also locked behind this. There's no New Game Plus, so not really any secret bosses to fight. If you're hoping for a lingering will situation like in Kingdom Hearts 2, well, it's just not happening here. So, like I mentioned before, you go kill a bunch of turtles and unlock stuff. It's tedious and boring.
Click on these fireworks.
Many of the achievements in the game are locked behind finishing the game as well, but one thing I can actually praise is the ultimate weapons of the game are somewhat unique in a way. Every single weapon in the game can be upgraded to 3 tiers. Tier 1 is the base weapon, Tier 2 is its upgraded form, but Tier 3 will turn all weapons into the best weapon for that character. However, which Tier 2 weapon you choose to do it with will affect the stats and effects of their endgame weapon. This is pretty cool because it means there are several versions of the endgame weapon and they're all catered to how you prefer to play that character. This is actually pretty damn cool and I actually love this. It's just too bad by the time you unlock it, there's little to do with them because the game is pretty much completely over. To wrap things up, as I said before, Final Fantasy XIII is not the worst game ever made, but it definitely has earned its title as the most divisive entry in the series. You can have a little fun with it, hell, even I had some fun at times, but it might leave you confused and wanting to play better games. Square Enix definitely has better offerings that you can try after all. While I stand by the fact that it is indeed the equivalent of holding a turd.
What the hell? No. Come on, no. This is disgusting.
Seriously, I think I got plenty of mileage out of that joke. It's a piece of history in the Final Fantasy franchise, even if it is a big piece of dog shit. And with all that, I can be thankful that I'm done with this terrible chapter of my life, except not really, because I have 2 more to play.
What kind of sick mother picks up wet feces?
Thanks for watching this video. Big shout out to Larissa for her awesome website, Defiers of Fate. Also big shout out to me for not only finishing this game, but having to play Duke Nukem Forever again, just to get footage of that overused joke. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one, and don't forget to leave your thoughts on Final Fantasy XIII below. Maybe I'll feature them in a future video. Wizplay here, and that's enough of that.
Real heroes don't need plans.